Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this glorious day. Thank you for all the angels that are in our midst and the learnings that we'll get today from the presentations by Dave and Mark. Be with them as they present to us their learnings, their knowledge of angels, and help us to have greater insight and awareness of angels in our lives as we go through day-to-day activities. Ask that you be with all of us as we go through the week, especially be with those that aren't with us in their here because of whatever reason. Comfort them and be with us as we go through all our activities. Keep us focused on you as we live our life. Bless this day. Amen. So David, I think we've introduced you enough, so come forward. Dave is so good at bringing together speakers and gets assistance from several of you in here also to fill in the agenda, but it's Dave leads that agenda of the speakers throughout the year and pulls together a marvelous set of programs. Because I get so many comments as I'm talking to people, be it here or at church, on how they enjoy the variety of talks that we have. You know, maybe all of them don't hit the spot for us individually, but they all are really good. So without further ado, Dave, it's all yours. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to take credit for putting together the program, but I can tell you, there's those among you that know there's quite a bit of providence involved. Speakers come to me like, what an idea. Wow. And it's, you know, when I first took the job, Barb and I discussed it for a long time. I said, how can I lead this group? I know nobody in the church. You know, I'm just not well connected, and people that know me from the alto group, they'll go, yeah. But providence is a huge part of our life. We don't see it. Speakers are brought to me all the time, and it is just God's gift. The program that you're getting is God's gift to you. So this topic Mark brought up about talking about angels is an amazing topic that a year ago I would have said you're nuts. But it's over the past year I've done quite a bit of reading. I want to take a break first, and I'm going to announce something that's important for next week. We have over 40 people coming for the luncheon at Concord Country Club. And I want you to put away your clown suits, because here's the dress code. We're not used to it because we don't go to a place that has a dress code. I no longer wear ties to church that often. On occasion I do, but you know, my closet's full of ties. But here's their dress code so that you can know. Pants must fit appropriately on or at the waist and must not be ripped, torn, frayed, soiled, or inappropriately loose or tight. Undergarments may not show. Clothing that exposes the midriff is only permitted at the swimming pool complex. Clothing and hats with words and or graphics referencing profanity and or offensive language is not permitted at the club. Denim is not permitted in the formal rooms. I only ask you to dress up once a year, and this is it. So I'm still between a sweater and a sports coat. So that tells you where I'm at. I'm going to be a little bit spiffy. I think it's appropriate at times to dress up for the others that we're with. So that's the mantra here.
Thank you, Dave.
So Angels here on earth. I would like to start out about angels because there's so much for Mark and I to get to. And but first I have to kind of introduce you to a topic so that we can understand angels. We're going to be talking about the biblical and the near-death experiences that relate to angels. And then at the end, Mark is going to get up and talk about angels' testimony from friends. First Thessalonians 5:23. Now may the God of peace himself sanctify you completely, and may your whole spirit, soul, and body be blameless at the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. I never think of myself as having three major components. I mean, the foot has 52 bones. The body itself is so complicated. How can all of these things fit together that the Bible makes a point of saying we have a body, a spirit, and a soul? So this is kind of a diagrammatic representation, body on the outside. We know that the body stays here. There's only been one person who took his body. That was Jesus. But he's the only one that's been allowed to take his body. The body has five senses: see, taste, feel, smell, and hear. But that doesn't even compare to the senses that our spirit has. In heaven, our senses are limitless. This is from Imagine the God of Heaven, page 44, paragraph 4. Thank you, Betty Ann. In heaven, we don't have just five senses. We have a ton of senses. Imagine a sense that allows us not only to see spiritual light, but to also to taste it, touch it, and feel light that is experienced in the presence of God. A beautiful way of receiving and sending love. So already, the way of talking is different. You immediately know the thoughts of the person you're with. If it's Jesus, he answers your questions before they get on your tongue. He knows your questions before. And he gives you so much information about your whole life, even your thoughts at every moment, in a brief life review that doesn't go on forever. But you're transmitted so much information mentally, it's faster than you could talk. And what's the biblical evidence for this? I really feel when Jesus took his three disciples, James, John, and Peter, up on the mountain, they were transfigured, bright lights standing there. Peter finally broke the silence and said, should we build you a temple for worship? And the God said, listen to Jesus. Why was Peter uncomfortable? There were no words being spoken. Jesus was just like this with Moses and Elijah. No words were recorded. None were ever spoken. They were transferring thoughts back and forth. Also, spiritual communications are both spiritual communications can also be visible. You can see love. You can see love. I mean, I have not been drinking this morning, okay? But you can actually see love. And I can tell you and give you the book that talks about that. And it's mostly in young children. who still have no barriers. They still love just phenomenally, carelessly. They're just full of love. So in the book of the little Carlton Burpo who went to heaven, his dad was a Methodist minister. It talks about him. He said, let's pray for Daddy for tomorrow's sermon. And he said, I see the light coming down into him all the time during his sermons. The love is both an immense feeling, but it also can be an energy for you. You can be energized if you have enough love. Isn't that something? There are also auras in the same book. A young mother, was taking her young daughter home from church, and she said, why do some people have lights above their heads? Those are called auras. So that some people are that rich in energy, love, forgiveness, and the ability to look to others for their wellness. Orbs of light have been seen in our church during a concert. So it is amazing the different types of spiritual things that some people can see. Now I must be down on Jesus's list way down here. I haven't seen any light. I haven't seen any angels. But I'm always looking. And that's something else that we have to do within our bodies, is to realize that we need to, as a young boy, I grew up thinking about God, and I said, I wonder when he's going to talk to me. I'm out here, oh, there's a big cloud, maybe it will be, David, thou shalt go, and I was always speaking in the King's English, thou shalt go and behold. But what I should have been doing is thinking, what are the thoughts that are coming into my mind? What do I need an answer for? And listen for the answer. I was out jogging with my daughter. I've told many of you that I'm kind of a klutz, and I tripped on the gravel road, and as I was going down, I said, how can this be good, Lord? And just before I face planted on the gravel road. But that's how we should approach life. Everything that happens is for a reason. There is a lot of providence in our life. And we just go about as if we're just bodies. We don't have a spirit. We don't have a soul. I'm going to have a good time today. So think about your life. Think about the things that are occurring to you and how they're important maybe for another person. And you don't want to just pass that person by when they may be looking to you for some sort of support or information. In my second hour of talk, no. So the body has 5 senses. What about the spirit? What does the spirit have? We know from the Bible there are 11 fruits of the Spirit. And I'm just scratching the surface here. But at least the Bible has told us about these 11 things that come from our spirit. And the references for the Bible are on each of the slides. I'm going to resend these slides along with my recording because I've added a couple new ones, and if you study my slides, they can be informative, I think. So 11 fruits of the Spirit. And the soul is the spark of God's light, his love. So when I use the word light or love, I'm not talking about electricity. I'm talking about love. There is no sun in heaven. Doesn't have to be. The love, just everything shines with God's love. And there doesn't have to be the electrical or the sun powered energy. So let's get to angels. Now that you know that they're not going to verbally address you usually, there may be a few instances where they come to you in a dream or things like that, but most of what you learn about angels will be what questions that you ask and answers are received in various ways. But the original word of an angel means messenger. And the angels that we are granted are angels such as a guardian angel. And guardian angels are the angels from the Lord who encamps around us, those who fear him, and he delivers them from the evil world that we live in. We don't often see the evil world. Last year, I showed you a picture of the devil in real life. Most of you don't remember, but it was 9/11, and there was smoke a dozen stories high on the World Trade Center, and the face of the devil was very, very prominent within that smoke. His face alone was 12 stories high. And another verse says, "For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you and keep you safe in all your ways." And what does that mean? Well, it means, and Lorna Byrne is the person that I've learned most about from angels. She was, growing up, she was regarded as a mental cripple. She was dyslexic, very dyslexic. They didn't even put her in school because it was hopeless. And but what they didn't know is she could see angels. And she would be playing with her angels, and she was even playing with another sibling on the floor that was her brother that had died 5 years before she was born. And she didn't discover it until their hands touched and lit up like light. And then she realized something's different about this guy. And so I highly recommend Angels in My Hair by Lorna Byrne, because the archangels and even other angels kept insisting that Lorna Byrne write a book about all of her visions. This is a dyslexic person that cannot read and cannot write. And the angels are telling her to write a book. What you will find out in the book is somebody brought a computer to her that you could speak into, and it would change her words into typing. But because she had no periods in her vocabulary, somebody had to come back and add paragraphs and periods and make the sentences seem. But she's now written about 7 books. So I've read Angels in My Hair, which is good, and Angels at My Fingertips, which is also good. And it's almost a whole new depth in the knowledge about love. In Angels at My Fingertips, she writes about how visible love can be, that she has seen in various children and things like that. But she is just wonderful. Everybody has a guardian angel. And she describes guardian angels. They're usually behind you. She maybe has seen once or twice a guardian angel get in front of somebody, but they're usually behind you. They have wings that you won't see the wings, but if you're feeling lonely or you're facing a crowd of people that you're talking to, they can give you courage. It's so that, and they're your guardian angel all of your life, and they go with you back to heaven. Our Heavenly Father assigns us a guardian angel and gives us a spark of light from his heart that is put in our soul. So each of us have part of God that we carry around for our journey here on earth. I've given you at least 3 links to some of her work. They're just wonderful. And when you hear her voice, it commands you to understand how compassionate and loving a person she can be for everyone. She even tells me to pray for my enemies, and I'm still working on that one. So I was bored. Oh, yeah.
Does each of our guardian angels have a name?
So, great question. Does each of our guardian angels have a name? Yes, they do.
Well, I can have Henry and Barbie can have Sue, or so to speak.
Yes. She talks about guardian angels not as a he or a she, but as an it, because it may change. You may need to have the Father's warm support at a certain point in your life, or a woman's guidance if you're at a different stage in your life, and the guardian angel will flip. So they're not, but they do have names. Do I know mine? No. Have I asked? Yes. But I'm still learning on how to communicate through that veil that keeps the angels separate from us. And there are plenty of YouTube videos on how to ask for your guardian angel's name. And you may get more details on that later. But let me tell you about a conversation I had with one of my grandchildren. I was kind of bored. I was in the basement and she was down there, and I said, what do you think of guardian angels? And I thought she would hit back at me, what's a guardian angel? She said, why don't they ever come in front of you? And I went, whoa, okay, that's enough for today. I'm not asking any more questions till I figure this one out. So, and then I was with her alone again. Her younger brother was playing with his farm down on his knees on the floor. And I said, can you see his guardian angel? Yeah, it's small like him. Can you see my guardian angel? You're sitting on him. You can't make this stuff up. You can't make this stuff up. And finally, we came to the pancake supper. I don't know how many of you came to the pancake supper to start Lent. And after we got back a couple days later, I said, did you count any guardian angels at the pancake supper? There were too many to count. So children, we've talked about them seeing light, seeing guardian angels. This only lasts for the first 8 to 10 years, 12 years of life. And then their ability to see angels becomes a veil. Why? I don't know. The memory of them also fades. so that they don't remember them. But I think it's to help them when they're at a very, very vulnerable age that they get to see their guardian angels. Isn't that amazing? So, what other types of angels are there? So, I've talked about guardian angels. Now I'm going to talk about archangels. There are, Lorna Byrne will tell you about unemployed angels that are all over the place. So you can learn about others, but those aren't as important as these two classes. So I've given you a link to where she's talking about them, but she's allowed to tell us about 4 archangels. Archangel Michael, who is a warrior of God, protecting all of us. Archangel Gabriel, he's the messenger angel. Raphael is the healing, compassion, and guidance, both physically and spiritually. We mostly pray for our bodies, right? We don't have to pray for our spirits. Well, we should. We should think of ourselves as sometimes having low spirits or challenging environments, and really we need that love, that spiritual energy to get us really pumped up to help others. And Archangel Uriel is the one of wisdom, enlightenment, and guidance. So there's 4 archangels that you can pray to, and she prays to them almost continuously throughout her day. So there are 2 places in the Bible that you can read about archangels. I'm surprised there's not more, but Archangel Michael was dealing with the devil when what they were going to do with the body of Moses. That is found in Jude 9. And a great discussion is in Daniel 10. And I'll tell you what it is. It's the messenger angel Gabriel, but his name is never mentioned. But he has responded to Daniel's prayer 3 weeks previously. But the devil held up Archangel Gabriel until Archangel Michael could come and free him to answer Daniel's prayer. We don't think this evil versus good warfare occurs very often because we never hear about it, right? We're bodies, not spirits. But we should think about that. I think about, I was on my way to choir once, and out of the bushes jumped a deer, and $3,000 later, my car was repaired. I never made it to choir that day. Oh, that's that Goodale. He's so lazy, he never comes to anything. But isn't it amazing? And you need to pray for your pastors, because they are especially susceptible to the devil on Sundays or when they're leading group gatherings here in the church. Okay. Angels appearing as humans on earth. Hebrews 13:2. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unaware. It tells us they're not going to be bashful. They're going to come, and if the Lord wants to find out if we're compassionate or want to help somebody in need, he may just send an angel on our path. I tell people the way I got over my aggressive driving, which my wife will debate it over it, but is I pretend that the other guy is an angel. How often do you know the guy in the other car?
Never.
Almost never.
Yeah.
And especially when we come down 202 and we get to the place where we're merging into one lane, I used to be on the left lane. I'm gonna get ahead of that sucker. Now I leave at least 2 car lengths. Could be somebody's in an emergency situation trying to get to their child who is having breathing problems at the school, or a doctor and who's trying to get to the hospital to reach a patient. We don't know. The worst thing we can do is leave church, feel very restored spiritually, and cut somebody off in traffic. What a Christian. Didn't even last out of the parking lot. So let me give you one example. I want to leave you enough room, Mark. So let me give you one example of angels here on earth. In Mary C. Neal's book about To Heaven and Back, she was stuck underwater for 20 to 30 minutes in a kayak beneath a waterfall. So the water put so much pressure on her, she couldn't even move. And they finally freed her, and out of the jungle materialized several Chilean men who they had the equipment, they whacked the way up the hill through the jungle and onto a road where an ambulance was waiting. She has tried multiple times to find those Chilean men in that ambulance. There were no such thing. The Lord provided those to get her the care she needed so she could get back to America and begin the healing process. She's convinced those were angels. And there's other examples that I've read in books where people have had those types of experiences. A man encourages her to go in during this application process, and she's hesitant to do so. And I guess it was a custodian at the school named Mark or something. She went back, no, we've never had a custodian at the school named Mark. But she was successful in getting the job. If she hadn't gone in at that particular moment, she wouldn't have been successful. So I think there's angels all around us and we just don't realize it. So, Mark, I'll give you the next few minutes and then we'll have time for questions at the end. What do you think? Okay, great.
Is the next slide?
Yeah.
Left arrow. Oh, it does work. Yep. I'm sure that many of you have stories that are as interesting or more interesting than the 3 that I'm going to present. But out of my vast store of stories, my wife can attest that I've got too many stories. I picked 3, and one is an angel as strangers, as a stranger, angel as acquaintances, and angels as angels. And this first one is my parents. I think they're pretty trustworthy people. Salt of the earth. They were both born in the South Dakota prairie in the teens. They lived through the Depression. They were very religious, although I don't know that you could really classify them as terribly spiritual, but they were very religious. And they always went to church. But as the years went on, they got more and more uncertain of the things that they knew for sure, especially my dad. My dad came to me one day with a book that he gave me and said, you know, I've always been a pretty straightforward guy. I thought I really understood how things worked. And this book changed my mind. And he gave it to me. Steve's reading it right now. It's called Ghosts in the Air. It's an interesting book. My mother was brilliant. She was a beautician and then a home keeper, but she was really the smarter of the 2. But my dad was as good as gold. and I would say very trustworthy, very straightforward. In the 90s, they used to go visit my littlest sister, who was career Navy. She and her husband both were career Navy. And at times they would be stationed somewhere that they thought was a good place for my parents to spend the holidays. So my parents would fly to these different locations and stay through the New Year. And they lived in Elmhurst, Illinois, which is very close to O'Hare Airport, but it's a little bit off the beaten path. And the taxis around there seldom got a return fare back to the airport. So they'd always charge fare and a half to go to their house in Elmhurst. So they found a limousine service. I think it was really just a guy with a car. And he became their favorite taxi driver. They called him their limousine because I guess that was much cleaner than a taxi. And he had a flat rate. He would take them to the airport. And then when they would return, usually they had a stopover and they would call Alex, we'll call him Alex, and say, we're going to be landing at such and such a time. Could you meet us? Sure. Well, this one particular year, they flew to Whidbey Island off the coast of Washington when my sister and her husband were stationed. And as they were returning after the New Year, a huge snowstorm came through the Midwest and really messed up the flight schedule. And they were diverted to Houston, which was not usually the way they flew back to Chicago. They landed at Houston. Chicago was socked in. They were not accepting any planes. None were leaving, none were landing. And they thought, we might get stuck here all day. My parents were never very flush with cash, and they spent their last few dollars getting something to eat at the airport. This was before cell phones. And they waited and waited. And the day was getting a little beyond. And all of a sudden, the announcement came that their plane was boarding. They didn't have time to go to a payphone and call Alex. And they said, well, when we get to O'Hare, we'll just go to the taxi stand. Very well-regulated taxi stand. They had somebody standing there making sure there was no jumping in line. They said, oh, okay, well, we'll do it. So they landed at O'Hare about 11:30 at night. It was still snowing. And they collected their luggage. And about midnight, they got out to the taxi stand. And I believe it looked kind of like this. This is a Getty image. I hope they don't sue us or sue me. But it's a real gaggle. Lots of cars, lots of people. And of course, Chicago after a snowstorm had been, pretty chaotic. So they went to the end of the line at the taxi stand. And immediately this car drove up. The window rolled down and the guy said, Leo, Ruth, hop in. I'm here to pick you up. I've been looking for you. And they thought, who is this guy? It wasn't Alex. Neither one of them knew who it was. So they put their luggage in the trunk, got in, and he's talking to them all the way home like he'd known them all in their lives. And they did not give him the address. He drove them straight to their house. And this, unfortunately, this is a summertime picture, but this is the house that I grew up in. It's being refurbished. These are nice new Pella windows. But at the time, there was quite a bit of snow outside. And this is obviously the front door. And this man drove up to the side door, which is over here. The side door was well hidden. The sidewalk was only this wide, and it was through a little notch in the hedge. Only people very intimately familiar with our family knew that they always used the side door. Now, they kept thinking, is this one of my former students? My dad was a biology teacher and a coach, but he never had students over to the house. Never. I never saw one there. And their circle of friends was so small, it was really a triangle. They only had two other couples that they ever dealt with. And Alex, who this person obviously wasn't, but he still drove right to their side door. My dad says, well, I don't have any money right now. Let me run into the house and get some in my office. So he took the bags out, set them on the curb. My parents picked up their bags, went in the house. They came back and he was gone. They said, well, maybe he'll come back tomorrow. Well, over the years, I asked my parents several times about this story. And I said, you went out and noticed that the car was gone. Were there any tire tracks in the snow? You got to remember, this is after midnight, very little traffic. My mom said, well, we could see our footprints and the prints where the suitcases were, but we didn't see any tire tracks. So that was a stranger. He never did come back. This is my personal story. Gretchen and I went to College Hill Presbyterian Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they had a number of rent houses next to the church that they were eventually going to tear down and turn into more parking lot, which they have done. And they were this, I don't have a picture of it, this is a craftsman style house. It's very similar to the one I'm talking about. This house was empty at the time. And the building committee decided that this house was such a mess that they were going to tear it down. But this was the time of the problems with the Sandinistas in South America. And there was some talk in the church about maybe making this available for one of the refugee families that was coming to the United States. And being a new member of the church, I was a little hesitant, but I finally said, you know, I think for maybe $1,000, we could fix this house up and make it habitable. So I went in there, just as I said this before I looked at the house. Tulsa is riddled with termites, and these houses were built somewhere between 1900 and 1930, and they're very tasty. And you go inside and look at the woodwork, and it looks fine, but when you pull off a piece, you realize it's a paint shell. All of the wood is gone. So I made an assessment of the house and said, well, the kitchen is workable. Everything works. It's not pretty, but it's a kitchen. The bathroom was a total disaster. The toilet needed to be replaced. The sink needed to be replaced. And the tub, it was a nice lion's claw tub. It needed a new fixture. So we spent a lot of money on that. We put in a new wall furnace. And this began about November. And I would ask people to show up on Saturdays, and we'd have working parties, and we enclosed the back porch, insulated it, wired it, turned it into an extra bedroom. The kitchen was in pretty good shape. We worked on the bathroom, and the only thing left by the middle of February was to seat the toilet. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have had the fun of dealing with the infamous wax ring that goes underneath the toilet. This was on a Saturday morning. It was 30 degrees, both inside and out, because we hadn't turned the heat on yet. Gretchen was working that day, so I took Leah with me. Leah was 3, and she brought her coloring book and her crayons, and she never complained. I know that sounds crazy, but she was very cooperative, and she sat on this old dead mattress, and she started coloring in her book, you know, breathing clouds of vapor. And unfortunately, this wax ring had been sitting in the house for a week, and it was frozen solid. So I put it on the floor, and I thought, well, this may be a little difficult. Set the toilet on it, and I pushed down, nothing happened. I sat down, and nothing happened. I jumped up and down, and nothing happened. Now, I've been at this since November. I was really done with this house project. So I cannot remember if this was silent or verbal, but I began to have a little conversation with God. I think most people would call it a tirade. And I said, you know, I've had a lot of help, but I don't like to ask for help. And I didn't ask for anybody to come here today, but I'm really upset that this is not working. And I've got Leah here. Yeah, she's tolerant, but I know she doesn't like sitting on this old mattress in her coloring book at 30 degrees. And would it be too much to ask for just a little bit of help right now? Now, that's the clean version. I was really pretty upset. I had no sooner got that last word out when there was a knock at the door. I opened the door and there was Marion Gainey, who had never been there before. He was the youth pastor and the cook, and he looked every bit of it. He was the largest person in the congregation. And I said, Marion, God had sent you, or at least the part I need. Come in here and have a seat. He sat down on that toilet and it smashed right to the floor, put the nuts on it, and I thought, this is not miraculous except for the timing. The thing about these things is the timing is what's important. So I had harbored that in my heart and pondered it over the years, and I've had other experiences like this. It may not seem too miraculous, but the timing is what's important. I think anybody that's had an encounter with an angelic spirit knows that the timing is really important. Now, this is a story that I'm going to read to you because I don't want to leave anything out, and I wrote it down shortly after it happened. This is a story related to me by one of my coworkers, and I think this story will tell it all. It's about the experience of Larry Cobble. And this is an angel story. Larry was a mechanic that I worked with at American Airlines for a few years. And let me make it clear, I did not like Larry. He was loud, uncouth, smoked in the shop, which was allowed at the time, a braggart, a former Marine, if there is such a thing, womanizer and proud of it. He raised dogs for many purposes, such as hunting and fighting, which is still illegal, I think, in Oklahoma. They've been debating that. And a few other things like that that made working with him an unpleasant experience. He talked a lot about sticking people with knives, a skill he was proud of. And he told the tale more than once about stabbing a guy in a fight over a girl in Mexico. How that turned out, I don't recall, but I believe Larry was pleased with the outcome as he told the story so many times. He always wore a hat, though he had a head full of hair. And I'll give a pass to a bald guy, but there's no reason for a person to wear a hat inside of a hangar. And if there's any redeeming virtue in Larry, he managed to hide it well. The only thing Larry did for me in a positive way is he taught me how to remove the first stage blades from a GE engine compressor without removing the retainers completely. I used this technique for years afterwards and always gave Larry the credit for showing me how. But that is the total extent of my praise for Larry Cobble. Until one day, Larry had left the shop for another job elsewhere on the base. He didn't like being indoors and probably didn't like working around me either. The rumor was that he was working in one of the hangars where he could be outside more often. A few years went by, and I heard stories about how Larry had gotten ill and had had a heart attack. Once or twice, I would check the American Airlines directory to see if his name was still there, and it was, and he was still alive, from what I could tell. Then I lost interest and quit looking. Larry never came to visit, and no one really knew where he was. So I just sort of forgot about him, like so many guys I'd known in the military and other places of work. Then one day, out of the blue, there Larry was, sitting astride a bicycle, looking at me from the hallway. It was a typical American Airlines utility bike, a heavy-duty yellow Schwinn single-speed coaster bike with fat tires and a basket. Larry was looking at me and waiting for me to say hi, so I did. Larry Cobble, I thought you were dead. Nice greeting that anybody would be glad to get from a long-lost fellow. Well, I was, Larry replied. Actually, I died twice. Getting into the swing of things with Larry, I continued, oh, you died, huh? Did you go through the tunnel? No, I didn't go through a tunnel, and I didn't see a bright light, if that's what you mean. There was a long pause. I had an interest in near-death experiences and was hoping that Larry might have had one, And that would have made Larry's death more than just a fact. Larry finally broke the silence. He said, I had an artificial heart for 2 years, and that got my attention. I said, what was that like? He says, well, it's not like being alive. He says, yeah, you're alive and you can think and eat and walk around, but there's something missing when you don't have a heart. You just don't really feel human. And I was about to comment on how would he know about being human since he was a Marine and not much of a human anyway, but I kept quiet as Larry was acting kind of funny. He says, it's an empty feeling, like you don't have a soul. I said, well, did you get a heart after 2 years? He says, yeah, I finally got one. That's the second time I died. Well, what was the first? Well, when they took my heart out, it was no good. They had to remove it and install the artificial heart. I flatlined, but they brought me back. Did you have any experiences then? No. Well, what was the second time? Well, when they took out the artificial heart and put in the real one, I flatlined again, but they brought me back. Still no tunnel or bright light, though. No, nothing like that. No dreams, just all black. At this point, I was pretty disappointed. If Larry's visit was no more than this, I began to wonder why he was there. Why did he seem like he still wanted to tell me something? I was not wanting to spend any more time with Larry, no matter how real his new heart was. I did see an angel, though. What? An angel? How do you know it was an angel? Now getting into the spirit of things, I said, did you see his wangs? Larry looked disappointed in me. It was almost as if he was a different person and I was the sad, same old one, same old me. No, it didn't have no wangs, copied Larry, accented all. It was the most beautiful creature I had ever seen. He waited and I didn't say anything. As I was in ICU after my heart surgery, my wife was sitting next to my bed, and she had been there for quite some time, was getting ready to leave. I had a roommate who was really ill. I don't know much about him, but he was hooked up to more machines than even I was. And then I saw the angel. It was in the doorway. I couldn't tell if he was standing there or just floating, but I knew he was there for one of us. My wife got up. She couldn't see the angel, but I sure could. I grabbed her arm and I asked her to wait for a few more minutes. And she took my hand off her arm and asked me why. But I said to her, please, just wait another minute. I'll explain in a little while. I didn't know if the angel had come for me or my roommate, but I wanted my wife there if it was my time to go. Somehow I knew the angel had come for one of us. Well, how did you know that? I asked. I don't know. I just knew it was the death angel, but I was in such shock because it was so beautiful. This is what I usually envision when I view the death angel. But this is what he was describing. I knew it was the death angel. There was no way to describe the way this angel looked. It didn't have wings, but kind of a gauzy robe, but not really cloth or anything. Somehow he spoke to me and told me not to be afraid. I wasn't afraid at all. He says, you can't be afraid of something that beautiful. I just wanted to look at that angel forever. I waited for a better description of the angel, but Larry was out of words for more detail. Then the angel moved into the room and stood next to my roommate's bed. And then all the alarms on the monitors went off. I could see his EKG machine was just putting out a flat line. Nurses came running into the room. One brought a crash cart and a couple of doctors came in, and there were probably 15 people there after a minute. My wife couldn't leave them because there were too many people in the doorway. And after a few minutes, 10 or so, they started to leave as it became clear that my roommate had died. My wife was feeling kind of nervous with all the action and asked if she could leave, and I told her yes. The angel was gone by then, and they wheeled the body out of the room. And it was really quiet, and I just kept thinking over and over what I had seen. Wow, that was really an amazing story. What else did you see in ICU? By now, Larry was getting uneasy. He probably thought he had said too much to someone who had not been taking him seriously, at least not at first. He got one foot up on the pedal on his bike. He says, I did see a lot more, but I really need to go now. So off he went. And I stood there for a long time, turning his story over in my brain, trying to square the Larry Cobble I knew with the one that I had just met again for the first time. He had really changed, and for the better, I could tell. I wanted him to come back and tell me the rest of the stories he'd had about being close to death and the other side, but I never saw Larry again. From time to time, I could check the directory to see if he was still on base, and then one day his name was no longer there. And somebody told me that Larry Cobble had died. This is when I really became interested in the spirit world, because Larry Cobble, who I thought was one of the more despicable people I'd ever met, had completely changed for the better and made me feel really, really bad about how I had acted towards him. And I kind of changed places. I was the despicable person for not taking him seriously at first. Well, those are my three stories. Angel is angels. And when I saw this picture, I said, that's what Larry was talking about. I think I'm done.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, David. Amazing presentations today. The background information on angels from David and personal testimony on how angels have become aware within Mark's life. And sitting there listening to Mark talk, I can't relate exactly some similar situations that I've had, but I know I can recall situations where I think, wow, that was miraculous. You mentioned timing of where things you almost think are impossible going forward. And something just clicks just right, beyond my ability to make that timing happen. And nobody else around made it happen. And it happens. Happenstance, angel. You be the call on that. So thank you for being here. Thank you for wonderful presentations, Dave and Mark. It's been great. So any questions to either Mark or Dave? We've got some time, or when 10 o'clock rolls around, you're free as always to get up and go to other things you may have planned, or stick around. Mark and Dave will be here to answer.
I think you meant 11.
Oh, it's 11. Well, Central Time.
So I think that the moral and the conclusion of this story is we need to not think or approach life as physical beings and see ourselves as really spiritual beings. Because, I mean, when Lorna Byrne tells me I need to pray for somebody, even people that I may have different views on, like President Trump, I have a hard time. And I'm challenged. But I think all of us need to think about our spiritual beings and maybe even share our stories. I've had a lot of stories. I've had stories about butterflies that have helped people, a hand on the shoulder that has helped people, near-death experience that has helped people. And generally speaking, it's hard to talk about these without tears. And that's fine. Yes.
I wonder if there could be a show of hands of people that have had a somewhat similar experience in life where that timing just came through.
Raise your
or
hand.
Something you can't explain.
Dave, you talked early on in your presentation on grandchild seeing auras of what they're about, or orbs. And the thought went through my head is,
and maybe don't have an answer for it, that's fine. In your readings about that and taking that further, why do some people see auras on people and why do some not? Cheryl says she sees auras on people. I don't.
So Jesus said to Thomas, you have received, you are blessed because you see. More blessed are those who cannot see. So I take comfort in the fact that I can lead you because I haven't seen angels, but yet I believe. And that's important for a certain fraction of us to be not blessed with seeing angels. So that's a partial answer. I think you can feel more blessed because you still believe, but yet have not seen. And I think that's why most of the children lose their ability to see guardian angels. I'm just afraid to ask them any more questions. Because Grandma said, where did you learn that about guardian angels? And you know who she pointed to? Me. Me. I was the one learning, yes.
I think I'm going to try to answer that. And when people have had a near-death experience, and it's very, there's IANS now, which is the International Association of Near-Death Studies, and so it's large. I mean, there's a lot of articles and lectures and things like that. When people have come back from a near-death experience, they're vibrating at a higher level, and we're actually, most of us vibrating at about a 3 right now. But when you come back, you're vibrating at about a 4, sometimes a 5. So you're more sensitive. Let me just put it that way. You're more sensitive to things around you. And it's just like, hummingbirds can see, I don't know, something like 519 different colors. And they talk, people that have come back from near-death experiences talk about colors, having many more colors that they're able to see. They're able to hear music at a much greater ability. And also when they talk about the tunnel, if you're a native somewhere and you don't really know what a tunnel is, you might say you went down a tailpipe of a car or a drain pipe. Or you might say instead of a light, like a vibrant light, you'll talk about a very vibrant sun, sun 1,000 times greater. And so it's really a cultural thing also.
Thank you.
So what she says is consistent with near-death experiences and things that I marvel at. And I think that the more we share them as brothers and sisters in Christ, hello, I hope you consider me a brother or sister, because we are. And that's our most important job. And so as many people raise their hand, if you ever want to share an experience, let me know about it. Nancy, I mentioned that I was from Muncie, Indiana, and she didn't curse at me. She said, somebody else is from Muncie here at the church, Chris. And I told Chris that I was from Muncie. She couldn't believe it. She said, find out what class he was. What a small world we live in.
It is.
When you really think about it. And some have gifts of, being able to see and talk. And the least we can do is pray for each other, especially if you have these phenomenal experiences, a butterfly or a hand or a near-death experience. So we're all blessed. Thank you for coming.
Amen.
Thank you.